Good evening and welcome to the Guilderland Central School District's Board of Education meeting. Today is a special meeting and it is October 8th, 2024. Can we all please rise for the pledge and silence our cell phones?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And the first item on our agenda is superintendent action. Marie?
Thank you. We have one action item before we turn to our presentation. We have submitted a grant in the amount of $15,000 for tobacco and substance abuse prevention education in schools. This is a grant sponsored by Albany County. It was actually due on Friday, and because of our board policy where we ask the board to approve before we submit, this was as close as I could get and make the deadline. So I am seeking the board's approval for the submission of this $15,000 grant. And I have to give credit to a community member, Christine Duffy, who actually drafted the grant for us.
Yes, thank you so much. Okay, so can I get a motion to approve the application? Okay, Kelly, second Nina. Any questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Passes 8-0. And then the Future Ready Task Force report.
Well, good evening, everyone. I'm so pleased to welcome you to this special meeting of the Board of Education. Tonight, we have gathered here our newly appointed Facilities Committee for the district, who's going to help us think through our next capital project. So thank you all for being here. We also have members of our Future Ready Task Force who have been at work for the past several months to think about what it means to be a future ready school district and what our facilities might look like in that case. So tonight, I'm going to spend about 5 or 6 minutes refreshing everyone's memory about how we got here. And then we're going to hear from the 5 subcommittees from the Future Ready Task Force who have been hard at work really since about the start of 2024. So let me take you first down a trip down memory lane, and we'll go from there. So we start every discussion of everything we do here in Guilderland remembering our mission, which I have shortened down to a couple words here, where we are focused on all kids, and we want to make sure that they are future ready. And when we talk about all kids, we talk about each and every because of the individual needs and interests of our children, which informs that whole notion of how we prepare kids for their future. So we embarked on a conversation almost a year ago answering the question, what do we mean by future ready? And all of this grew from some work that the Board of Education did to establish some priority areas for the year span of 2020 to 2025. And those were the SMART goals, the 4 that are noted here, that the board established way back in 2020 that we have been working on for all of these years. And we are now really on that last goal there, where we're focusing again on our future ready facilities. So we just left a meeting where we talked about it's time probably to look at our goals again because we're coming to the end of this cycle. So one of those areas around facilities really focused in on a couple things. One that we've been working on right along, which is to maintain and support our technology, including cybersecurity. But the big thing that we're focused on tonight is this whole idea of developing a shared vision for future ready facilities. And we wanted to engage our community in what future ready actually means to us and why it's important. And we wanted to and did reflect on that time during the pandemic to give us some insight into that. And as part of this, we've also visited some other school districts. We also visited some of our own buildings to think about what do we currently have here. So our plan for Future Ready was really to think about these 3 things. What does it mean in terms of our educational programming? Programming should drive the facilities that we have, not the other way around. And then what would we want our facilities to look like in order to support that educational planning? And that ultimately was the work of the Future Ready Task Force. that was about 50 stakeholders strong. So we're so appreciative of all the work that they did. And their purpose was to review best practices around teaching and learning, to gather input from our community, and think about how we are preparing graduates for their future, and then to think about the implications for our facilities. They did lots of work. We had 5 subgroups because a group of 50 would have a hard time sinking their teeth into the nuts and bolts of things. So we had those 5 are elementary programs. We had science, technology, engineering. I forgot the arts, very important arts, and math in STEAM. We had a humanities group, we had a performing arts group, and we had a group that looked at our gathering spaces. And since their formation, we met in large group, mostly virtually, but also in subgroups to share research, plan, visit schools, and so on. So all of that led to preparing a presentation of recommendations for the Facilities Committee in the Board of Education. So we're kind of culminating that work this evening. And just to give you a sense of who was in our group, we had parents, we had students who are, as always, phenomenal in their feedback to us and helping us think through what's important. Lots of community members, also employees from all of our employee groups, support staff, administrators, and also some Board of Education members. And the highlights of the timeline, we started back in December, so almost a year ago. The members of the Future Ready Task Force were appointed in January. They met February through May, March through May. They did some community engagement. We did a thought exchange. We took field trips. June to July, they drafted their preliminary recommendations and fine-tuned them over the summer. In June and July, we recruited our facilities committee, and they were just appointed in September. October 2024, this is where we are tonight to share those recommendations. After tonight, we will have our facilities committee meeting 4, 5, 6 times between now and the end of January to make the formal recommendations to the Board of Education about what would be included in a budget, in a capital construction project vote in May of 2025. So that is the big deadline that we're working toward. So without further ado, we're going to hear from our 5 subcommittees. We're going to start with elementary programs. We're going to hear from Dr. Alan Lockwood from Guilderland Elementary School. Next, we'll hear from Mike Piscatelli at the high school, who worked with the STEAM subcommittee. Then I'll jump back to talk about the work of the Humanities Committee. Then Mr. Bob Winans and Mr. John Fatuzzo will come up and talk about performing arts needs. And Mr. Wolf, who's going to come up here and adjust our technology with Dr. Lockwood, will close us out with gathering spaces. From a process perspective, each of the presenters is going to take about 10 minutes, give or take, to share their work. We'll pause at the end and take questions group by group. So board members are welcome to ask questions. Anyone in the audience is welcome to come up to the microphone and ask questions. We're going to try to keep it to about 15 minutes for each of the subgroups. And then at the end, we'll have an open discussion. Kind of unusual. This is not the typical board meeting where the board only listens. This is a time for us to have a give and take. So, without further ado, I will unplug my laptop and we'll transition back to the saved PowerPoints.
All right, good evening, everyone. As we get started, I would like to thank the members of the Elementary Program Subcommittee for their work and their dedication. These people put a lot of time and effort into this work during a very busy time of the year. So I'd like to thank our committee co-chair, Carrie Tymason, and members Judy Slack, Katie Barker, Jackie Vandenberg, Lisa Knowles, Emily Mino, Jamie Frank, Amy Irwin, and Meredith Schaefer. I'll do this. All right. So I first wanted to share a timeline of our work. As Dr. Weil said, we met in February for an organizational meeting, and there we developed our essential questions to shape our work. What would future-ready elementary classrooms look like? And what changes and improvements should we make to our buildings to support staff and students into the future? The next month in March, we established some field trip dates. We decided that we really wanted to tour all of the schools in Guilderland, since many of us had experience only in one or two of those schools. And then in April, we took field trips to Guilderland Elementary in Westmere on one night, and then the next, a couple weeks later, to Pine Bush, Linwood, and Altamont. Then in May, we got together to review our findings from the building tours. A short time later, the Thought Exchange was released to stakeholders, where we gathered some more critical information. And then in June, our subcommittee met to discuss and review schools from out of the area with our CS architect, Melissa Rankowitz. And then near the end of June, we had our final meeting to review the Thought Exchange data and to put together our recommendations. Now, we did not uncover a great deal of research into what future-ready elementary classrooms look like, but we leaned a lot on trauma-informed design research and used a trauma-informed design rubric as a lens to view our elementary school buildings. We also had the good fortune to have those discussions with Melissa Rankowitz, who was able to share some pictures and information about what some schools across the country have been doing in this area. As noted before, our committee toured the elementary school buildings, and we used the trauma-informed design rubric for K-12 schools. That rubric views schools through 12 different domains. They include safety, accessibility, biophilia, or connection to nature, inclusion, equal access to opportunities and resources, wayfinding, the ways in which people orient themselves in buildings, and this can often include visual cues such as colors, floor tile patterns, and signage, visibility, comfort and aesthetics, lighting, acoustics, choice and flexibility, and this can include choices in workspaces, seating, and furniture, movement and play, looking for environments that foster movement, play, and social interactions, community and culture, looking to see that our schools were places where people feel that they belong, and this is often done through color choice, artwork, logos, and other representations of culture. As we began our tours, we were able to make many observations, including how similar yet how unique each of our buildings really were. We looked here at the first 6 domains of the trauma-informed design rubric, and we noted that our buildings really did feel safe and secure. Hallways were generally clear and uncluttered with good signage, and there were lots of connections to nature, including every classroom having windows with views to the outside, and the use of natural, or at least the appearance of natural materials. Some areas for growth that we noted here were around dated or insufficient bathrooms for students and staff members, including the need for an increase in handicapped accessible bathrooms, a lack of storage in classrooms and in the buildings themselves. As we looked through the next 6 domains, through the lens of the next 6 domains, we found that our buildings had a lot of art displayed and an increasing amount of cultures represented and celebrated, creating that important sense of community. But there were also some significant areas for improvements, including a lack of space to create sensory environments or places where students can go to take a break, Student seating and furniture was old or antiquated. There was a need to improve classroom lighting and parking lot lighting. In May, as we said, the district released the Thought Exchange seeking information from stakeholders about priorities for creating future-ready spaces. I've included the AI-generated summary of the comments here that communicate a desire for clean facilities that have flexible lighting and temperature controls, and there was also a strong desire for more modern and flexible furniture options, as well as space for collaboration and small group work that would benefit all students, but perhaps more so our students with special learning needs. So here are, you can see the topics that received the highest amount of comments through the Thought Exchange. And for the elementary programs, these really included clean environments, classroom furniture, aesthetics, lighting, collaboration spaces, and flexible seating. Our committee looked through many of these topics and pulled some of the relevant comments that received 4 stars or more as people rated them. There's a clear thread through these comments of a desire for clean and aesthetically appealing spaces with a variety of seating and work surface options for the varied needs of our students. Lighting is another subject for which there was a lot of conversation. Classroom lighting can be rather harsh, and for some students it's overstimulating. This can lead to teachers turning off the lights during the day, which then of course leads to some obvious challenges. There's not really an in-between option between on or off for our lighting. And finally, the need for collaboration spaces was expressed by many. Spaces in classrooms or in buildings that would allow for small group work with ample access to technology. Later on in our committee's discussions with Melissa Renkowitz, she was able to share some pictures of other schools from around the country that had taken this work on. She was not aware of any elementary schools in the area that had taken the leap to be future ready. So in these pictures, you can see some of the examples of collaboration spaces. Often these are built into hallways, but other options noted, such as taking existing classrooms and removing walls to create more open shared space that can be used by small groups of students, either working independently or with teachers. And I would like you to note some of the colors through there and certainly some of the flexible seating options. She also shared many pictures. There are many, many examples of different options for flexible seating in classrooms, and these are certainly some of the many choices that are out there nowadays. So when we looked at all this information, we developed our list of recommendations for the board and the work of the Facilities Committee. And those recommendations, in order of importance for the committee, were to create space for collaborations for students and staff members, updated classroom furniture that provides seating options for students that can be reorganized for a variety of learning activities, updated and improved classroom lighting that can be changed to meet the activity, space for sensory and social emotional learning activities to meet the variety of needs of a variety of students, use of color in the hallways and classrooms to provide a warmer environment and wayfinding, increased storage in classrooms, updated bathrooms for students and staff members that provide better privacy, and improved lighting in parking lots. So thank you very much, and at this time I'll take any questions that you may have.
How is the air conditioning working in the 700 wing at GES? Because I remember last year when it got very, very hot, it wasn't really working well.
Well, I think HVAC systems are always a challenge, to keep them running optimally. We didn't really look at HVAC systems as part of the future-ready work of the committee, but I would say there's work to be done.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you very much, everybody, and I'd like to bring up Mike Piscatelli.
It's earned it. That was for you.
I know.
It's your walk up.
Good evening, everybody. Again, I'd like to thank, just like Alan did, all the committee members who devoted a lot of time and work into this effort. My co-chair was Colleen Gilbert, Dave Dwyer, Satnam Kaur, Marie Crichton, Ken Sunkasella, Nana Frimpong, Shannon Elliott, Max Corbett, and Elizabeth Passanella. So our committee was STEAM, Science, Technology, Engineering, Arts, and Math, and Careers. So we kind of had a very broad category that we were trying to look at. When we look at the essential questions, the first one that we spent a lot of time talking about was, where does CTE live? So when we say CTE, Career and Technical Education, we know that there's definitely been a big movement to open up opportunities so that students can gain those experiences in the trades. And so we were having a lot of conversations about the mixture of programs that are going to happen in-house and programs that will happen outside the building as well. Another essential question was, again, how can we give students more hands-on experiences in the STEAM classrooms and connect those skills to real-world applications? Big question, what will effective instruction look like in a STEAM classroom in the future? And our last question was, how do we transform STEAM instructional spaces? And again, as we're going on these presentations, there is a common theme that I feel like you hear in a lot of the subgroups about the instructional spaces. So as far as research goes, we actually tried to look at some of the internal spaces that had been transformed recently. The high school had its science classrooms done in a recent renovation, so we brought the subcommittee in to take a look at those spaces, see how there was some flexibility in the design of those spaces to improve instruction. We also asked people to share innovative instructional spaces that were going on across the district, or across the middle school and high school, and people shared photos of those. We looked at community college offerings because we were trying to get a lens into few areas where people are investing resources that may be areas we want to invest in as well. We reviewed documentation on trends in employment. We discussed a couple of specific instructional approaches, problem-based learning and project-based instructional approaches. And we looked at some thought leaders such as Daniel Pink, Steven Pinker, Simon Sinek, etc. So recommendations, we broke it down into really 3 spots, which was instructional, authentic learning experiences, and then reconfiguring the classroom. So one of the things that we talked about was having a mandatory career and money skills class at GHS or FMS, embedding that into our program of studies, because right now it's an optional piece. It is partially covered in some of our economics classes, but we think that students could really benefit with a focus in that in a required class that all students take. We talked about if we are going to look at problem-based learning instructional approaches or project-based learning, we need professional development on those areas to help people. We have pockets of expertise in this, but it's certainly not consistent across. We talked about the idea of having cross-departmental courses. So maybe a technology class is taught with a science teacher, or a culinary class is taught with a math teacher. Looking for opportunities where we can show students the connection between the disciplines rather than kind of a silo approach that we're kind of in right now. And the last thing was taking advantage of artificial intelligence and virtual learning applications. How can that be interweaved into our instructional practice? Authentic learning experiences. partnerships with outside organizations. So trying to build in field experiences for students in our program. Like right now, we have a career exploration internship program at the high school and a work experience program. I would say it's very underutilized. And I think it's very underutilized because it's something that students look to take when they're a senior. When we're talking about these partnerships for field experiences, having them embedded throughout a curriculum so that students have more opportunities to get those experiences. Again, virtual reality applications, because there's some things we just can't do hands-on, but can we give students experiences where they get that? Like at our career and trades fair in the spring, students were using a virtual reality application that was letting them perform surgery. So we wouldn't want students to do that hands-on in the classroom. So again, student field experiences in-house performing school functions. This kind of came out of our discussions about the student help desk that we have right now at the middle school and high school. Right now we have student helpers dealing with technology problems for the adults in the building. So we reached out to Cliff Nooney and said, is there applications where we could have students helping out with some of the functions that go on day to day, whether it be auto mechanics or groundskeeping or whatever it may be, heating and plumbing in the buildings, but opportunities where we could train students to help and assist in those areas and maybe spark an interest. Courses focused on careers so students can explore interest areas. We've made progress on this over the years, but we think we could do more with this. And lastly, in-house CTE programs. Look into expanding our technology department classroom space to allow more opportunities. And again, we mentioned technology, but I think this could be applied to any CTE area. And our last one was kind of similar to Dr. Lockwood's, was reconfiguring learning spaces. Flexible seating, I feel like you're going to hear flexible seating like a million times tonight. But again, it's about the ability to group students differently. That's why most people are focusing on that. One of the things we were talking about, and this is a little bit of a STEAM focus, is rooms that can change configuration very quickly. So instead of it being set up solely as a science room, it could be reconfigured and used as a technology room or a math classroom or an arts classroom, anything where it's got the adaptability to be used for multiple purposes. Writing spaces, and this kind of gets into the group work, taking advantage of things we don't traditionally think about, like making cabinet doors whiteboard spaces so that students could work around a cabinet and could brainstorm together or problem solve together using that space. Vertical workspaces, we were talking about using the windows differently, and some, again, as workspaces rather than just solely as windows. And again, building spaces that you could look around, discussion spaces, small group work areas, project rooms. Again, just like Dr. Lockwood said, hallway discussion areas. Taking advantage of spaces that we traditionally are not using during instructional time. And that's it. Any questions for me?
I have a question.
Yes.
This is great. Did we also look at some of those authentic learning experiences for our secondary special education students with higher learning needs, some of that work-based learning piece? Secondary level?
Yeah, so you're talking about like our CSP classrooms and so forth. I think, again, absolutely, this applies to them as well, to anybody, yeah. Any other questions? Dave?
But we might also kind of need kind of a course committee because, you know, if we're going to do something as simple as, say, welding, we really need that other group that's going to go after what is this going to entail, what is this going to do. So I think we will have to need more committees, but basically so that way we can combine it and we can make it, and so we can show everybody this is what we're doing. And we have, you know, the map. So you guys will have, you know, not just, hey, we just found this book, this will work kind of deal.
definitely. Thanks, Dave.
Becca, I have a question.
Oh,
The mandatory career and money skills class, I know this has come up before. And one of the arguments against it has been finding room for it in students' schedules. Was that discussed at all?
yeah, I hate to throw Mr. Laster under the bus, but we were talking about, a lot of discussion was, could we interweave it into the middle school program, possibly in 8th grade? But again, I think one of the things, financial literacy, we all know how important that is for students to have that. But also, it's a prerequisite for a lot of our coursework in our business department going forward, which, again, like just thinking about that CTE program in particular, you need to have that class to get into the upper level CTE classes. So again, if we could give students that experience, and again, whether you go into a CTE program or not, I still think it's valuable for every student to have that experience. Yeah, Nia?
To ask about that, is it more age appropriate for it to be an older group, and would it substitute an economics requirement similar to the one that already does?
I don't think it would substitute our economics requirements. I think students in 8th grade could handle the topics that are being discussed in there, for sure.
One of the big benefits with the CTE programs are, you guys know about, we have Albany and we have Schoharie. Well, those transportation costs are not cheap. We have to have people constantly going. And the reality is those kids only get 2 hours. We can give them more with in-house CTE. We just have to kind of make it so that it can be utilized by other students so that we get more bang for our buck. I think, and also too, with the program with the working in the schools, as I showed him in Burnt Hills, they have a program where the 9th graders will work inside the schools, and then they do have career internships, and they also have a job. They had a job board. I was there for a game, and they had a job board, and apply here. And for them, they have a program from Saratoga County that helps out. It's called the Captain Program. I don't know if any of you guys are familiar with it, but they actually it's a nonprofit that the county set up for them, that they send people to train the students how to get jobs, how to apply for jobs, all that stuff. And then also that person is their mentor when they do get the job, to kind of work with them. It's a great thing. I mean, I wish Albany had it, but I mean, it's a nonprofit, unless maybe we could ask them for, send somebody over.
Any other questions? Nina?
More question on the hallway discussion areas. Can you talk more about how that would configure based on passing time and things like that?
I think the idea about the hallway discussion time is that it would be when we're in instructional blocks. So it'd be areas that students could go out to have discussions with their small groups. Yeah, Blanca.
Have any after-school clubs or anything that have to do with money skills currently? I'm trying to think of things that we have available to get us from A to B.
Is there investment? Yeah, I was just going to say, we have an investment
Yeah, I saw the
class and we have
flyers
an
in the hallway.
investment club, yeah.
That sounds a little different than money skills.
Yeah, it's definitely focused on investing, so.
Listening, that might be a really great club. Thank you.
Okay, I'll turn over to Dr. Wiles.
All right, now switching gears to the humanities. We had an awesome working committee as well. Rachel Anderson, Leah Holmes, Sarah Iddings, who was our co-chair of that committee, Ashley Kaplan, Sarah O'Grady, Amanda Stegar, Gloria Toll-Hilt, and myself. And we had a frequent guest in Melissa Renkowitz, so we appreciate all that hard work and all that opportunity to think through how best to set up our humanities classrooms. And so our essential questions were not a lot different than the ones that you've heard. They're just tinged with the notion of thinking about humanities and what does forward-thinking instruction look like in social studies and languages and English language arts and so on? And then what should the classrooms that support that forward-thinking instruction look like? And you will hear some familiar themes as I walk through our work here. So our sources of information, we did take a look at the April 2024 Thought Exchange results, where we heard from a lot of our faculty and staff about what their ideal teaching space would look like. We took tours of our instructional spaces at Farnsworth and Guilderland High School, and we actually visited some of the science classrooms as well to get a sense of that flexibility piece. So we branched out from the humanities a little bit. We had plenty of input from our friends at CETS Arch, and we also did some reading. 2 texts informed a lot of our thinking. One was a text by Lawrence Steinberg called The Age of Opportunity. Lawrence Steinberg is a writer who spends a lot of time thinking about adolescent development and what happens in the brain during learning. He's the gentleman who talks about the plasticity of the brain for adolescents being as great as that growth in brain development that happens from age 0 to 3. Only adolescence is age 10 to about 25. So when parents hear that, they cringe just a little bit because that seems like a very long time to be in that mode. But we read his texts look at not only how does the brain develop, but then how do we respond as parents and educators and so on. And then also a text that came really into the spotlight while we were at work was The Anxious Generation, which has been mentioned many times in the context of the role of social media and smartphones in the teaching and learning space. Here's just the flash, the visual of our thought exchange results. But here's the content that came up, and again, lots of familiar themes. And again, these came directly from our own faculty and staff. A lot of comments around furnishings and equipment, and you see spacious, well-lit, comfortable, flexible seating options, modern, functional furniture, and of course, spaces that are equipped with up-to-date technology and resources. There was a strong emphasis as well on cleanliness and comfort, which came into the notion of places being clean, being safe, being aesthetically pleasing, with enough storage, appropriate ventilation. And we spent a lot of time in our group talking about access to the outdoors. And then we talked also and heard from our stakeholders around varied instruction, and again, spaces that are conducive to collaboration, to project-based learning, and designed to accommodate different learning styles, different body types, so that we can take our 84 minutes and turn them into a interactive, varied instructional approach kind of experience. So again, the 2 texts that we read, Understanding Adolescence is a remarkable period of brain reorganization and plasticity. My favorite quote from the book, and I always say it, but it's worth remembering, adolescence is like a car with a touchy gas pedal and terrible brakes. And that is a lot of what we're dealing with young people. And then again, I mentioned The Anxious Generation, exploring the impact of technology on childhood development. And what we saw on the left there, we saw lots of traditional classrooms in our buildings. We also saw traditional classrooms that teachers were quite creative in trying to reorganize them and rearrange them to create more flexible spaces. But I also shared a photo of the high school pavilion. We visited it when we were as a team. There were no students in it, but I'm pleased to say this picture I took out of the window of my office, it is often populated with a classroom teacher and students. In this particular case, they've got the Promethean board on wheels out there. And if you were to go out there, you would see that the furniture is in fact flexible, moves easily. Some of the pieces are tall, some of them are regular height. So students can find the spot that is comfortable for them. And that's kind of the feel that we're hoping for in all of our classrooms. So our guiding principles in our recommendations, we talked a lot about the balance of technology. And yes, technology is great. We use it a lot, but it can't replace the power of the face-to-face interaction between students and faculty, and that notion of collaboration. And how do we build a space that makes that possible? And that's that whole notion of flexible space, flexible furniture. We also talked a lot about decluttering space, but it was not just to have no clutter at all. We talked again about balance, where how can a classroom look neat and organized and without clutter, but also warm and inviting, and with the visuals that will bring the students into the content that they're learning. So not sterile was very much a theme coming from our committee. And then again, the theme of balance is safety and security balanced with a warm and welcoming environment. Our committee did not want to build fortresses in our classrooms, but rather places where people feel safe and welcome. So here are our recommendations. And I say to be done at some point, recognizing that we're talking about a lot of stuff tonight and all of it can't be done at once. But at some point, we would like to see furniture across our classrooms that allows for flexible instructional approaches, flexible instructional spaces, storage to reduce clutter, lighting upgrades, including window treatments. We spent a lot of time talking about the aesthetics of window treatments and their function as well, to either close out light to make it easier to see video presentations or others, but also able to open easily if necessary. We talked about equitable access to technology for charging and presenting. Not all of our classrooms have Promethean boards yet. We're keenly aware of that. And then learning spaces that utilize aspects of nature and or the outdoors. So here's what we were thinking for May of 2025's vote. We recognize that we can't transform every classroom in the district where humanities are taught. That's probably a couple hundred classrooms. But if it would be possible in May to select a number, I don't know what that number is, to transform some spaces in both the middle school and the high school along these ideas around furniture, storage, lighting, window treatments, technology access. And the committee was very much interested in being able to try out some furniture. Lots of vendors will let you do that, to see what works, what we like, before making a commitment. And that's what the humanities were talking about. Questions? Go ahead, Rebecca.
And about books in the environmental space and the library, whether or not that was like looked at specifically. I think it came out recently, I don't know if it was in the Atlantic or not, that a lot of high schoolers aren't reading books to completion. And I just wanted to know if that came up at all, books in the actual classroom space.
It actually did. We did talk about books. We actually visited the high school library, and I know that one of our presentations tonight on gathering spaces will talk about that. But the whole notion of books in classrooms was very much a priority. And yes, Mrs. Toll-Hilt shared that alarming Atlantic article with me as well, that students don't seem equipped to be able to read a book from beginning to end. So yes, that's alarming. Any other? All right, then I will invite Mr. Winans and Mr. Fatuzzo up to the podium.
Good evening. We'll be presenting for the Performing Arts Subcommittee. So when we were taking a look at our work, the essential questions that we took a look at are very similar to others. It was, what do performing arts students need in order to be future ready, and what are the challenges the performing arts currently face here in Guilderland? So in order to be future ready, our students need access to educational technology in their music classrooms, accessible and flexible spaces for individual collaborative practice and rehearsals, and facilities that support and enhance a student's music education. And what we found was that the challenges that we're facing align very well with those needs. We have currently outdated or non-existent access to basic and music-specific technology in learning spaces, limited or non-existent rehearsal, lesson, and practice spaces, and teaching and learning spaces that are not conducive to the best music learning atmosphere. So all of that led us to kind of a new essential question, which was, how do our current facilities support the music program?
As we took a look at all of the different levels, because performing arts spans K through 12 here, generally we found that there are more similarities than differences between our needs at all three levels. And the biggest issues come back to the amount and the adequacy of our learning spaces, as well as storage. So for example, in the elementary schools, the ensembles that currently meet outside of the school day, which is a bit of an equity access piece issue for us, that students that do not have transportation might not be able to participate in ensembles during the school day. Absence of dedicated performance spaces, meaning at some of our buildings they have to have their performances at Farnsworth or at the high school. Classrooms that are not large enough for ensemble rehearsals, inequitable access to technology, lack of storage for instruments, and outdated equipment. And those last few things on this slide you'll see carry over to what we have at Farnsworth Middle School, especially with regards to the rehearsal spaces as well as lack of storage. And then again, at Guilderland High School, with the high school having the benefit of having a performance space, but we're going to talk about that in just a moment. But again, kind of just this recurring theme of lack of storage or inadequacy or just absence in general of some of our of learning spaces. So how did we gather research to inform what our next steps were going to be? This part of the presentation we're going to be a little quick over because we want to get to our recommendations, but we did a survey of all of our stakeholders, which included all of our performing arts faculty members, high school students in performing ensembles and music and performing arts clubs and theater clubs had the opportunity of putting their thoughts into a Google form, and we had about 200 responses on that. Site visits to area schools, some of which have completed recent capital projects on their spaces. Conversations with our building designer, Melissa Renkowitz. She came to one of our task force meetings, and we linked here the Wenger Planning Guide. Wenger is an outfitter for equipment and for storage units for music programs, and they have an entire very expansive guide that goes over their recommendations for building a music suite. So we just linked that here, but we're not going to talk much more about that in this particular presentation.
So over the next few slides, I'm going to be showing you a comparison, a side-by-side comparison of our current facilities and how they compare with some other facilities from some of our site visits. So currently at Guilderland High School, we have 2 rehearsal rooms for 3 curricular ensembles. That's band, chorus, and orchestra. These spaces don't have very good acoustics due to HVAC or low ceilings or the size and configuration of the room. Our only practice rooms are housed inside of the choir room so that they're really not accessible to our instrumentalists. When classes are going on, they're not soundproofed, so they're really not usable. Our choir room houses spillover instrument storage. Our orchestra room houses band instrument storage, and currently our band has to rehearse on the stage and share that space with the theater program and a variety of other programs as well. And our office space is often used as storage and as lesson space. What we need is 3 rehearsal spaces that have proper acoustics that enhance the music education of the students. We need instrument storage, a large sink in the band room, which will cut down on repair costs when we can take care of certain things ourselves that we have to currently send out, a music library space, instrument repair space, furniture that is designed for musicians, outside entrances because we're moving a lot of equipment, access to technology including audio recording and playback, and a water bottle filling station in the choir room is a real nice add because singers like to drink water. Another thing that we that would be really helpful is to have an additional teaching space. This is something that could be used for a modern band program, which is an up-and-coming movement in music education that we would really like to start at Gilderland High School. In essence, it's like rock bands and things like that. This space would also be useful for our jazz and stage bands because these ensembles all have a different type of equipment and sound reinforcement that they need. It can also be used for Music in Our Lives, music technology, AP Music Theory, and courses like that. We need individual and large group lesson and practice rooms that are equipped with whiteboards and acoustic panels and soundproofing so that our students can practice and that we have alternate spaces for lessons because we have some other teachers that come to the high school to also teach lessons. So sometimes we're trying to house 5 or 6 different lesson spaces and we just don't have room for everyone. And we also need office space for our music teachers and also for myself. Be a little self-serving there for a second. So in terms of our auditorium space, which this is the main district performance space, our auditorium acts as a band classroom, a theater classroom, lesson space, concert space, theater performance space, and presentation space. And what you often get with all this going on is that you've got groups that are competing for time in that space. As a classroom, there is no classroom technology. We have outdated lighting and sound equipment. And it's poorly designed as both a theater and a music space. There's insufficient fly space, which is the space above the stage that you use to fly in scenery. Insufficient line sets, which are the pipes that the lights and curtains and set pieces hang from, and insufficient wing space, which is often crowded with music equipment and theater sets, and it's a safety hazard. And we have insufficient seating. For a school district of our size, there are 1,600 students at the high school, and our auditorium seats just over 600. So what do we need? We need increased audience capacity. We need a large reconfigured stage that's good for both theater and concerts. Safe, easily accessible catwalk for lighting, and a space that's designed for optimal acoustics. If you note the second picture down, you'll see a balcony there. That is Burnt Hills Auditorium. They just underwent a renovation, and that balcony was added to increase their seating capacity. Their seating capacity was about what ours is before that renovation. We need increased fly space and number of line sets, increased wing space, state-of-the-art sound reinforcement, audio and visual recording capabilities, live streaming capabilities, and lighting technology. Sound shells, which encompass the stage, and a sound cloud that can fly in, and that helps to improve acoustics for concerts, and a pit that can be raised and lowered through the use of platforms for theater productions. Additionally, we're recommending a scene shop, which would provide a better, safer, more educationally sound environment for building sets. It would alleviate stage usage because currently, if you're in the high school around theater production time, they're building sets in the high school, or sorry, in the hallway, on stage, basically anywhere they can find a couple square feet. And it would also allow for expanded course offerings such as music or theater tech courses. Some additional spaces at some of the locations that we found were Black Box Theater, which is a smaller, more intimate type of theater, or a flex space. It could be a combined space that's also used as a dance studio or a media production. The one in Burnt Hills has an attached control room, so they use it for both theater and for media production. or a dance studio, dressing rooms, costume shop, lobby areas that have monitors for displaying what's going on stage, display cases, seating for guests, and of course, large bathrooms to accommodate all of those guests.
When it comes to our recommendations, I should have mentioned when I spoke last, when we looked at each of the different levels, elementary, middle, and high school, there was some color coding happening in there showing where our needs are, where they exist, and also where they exist in the highest priority. So it basically broke down to the high school being the site that needs the most amount of work in the near future. So our recommendations for the May 2025 look at our facilities are an overhaul of the Guilderland High School music suite, including the addition of a band room, enlarging and renovating our chorus and orchestra spaces, creating an additional classroom or rehearsal space as kind of like a flex space for these other ensembles and electives to use, office spaces for small group teaching, as well as common planning and meeting spaces, and sufficient storage for what it's a lot of big equipment, choral risers, chair and stand racks, large percussion instruments, and pianos that none of that stuff really has a home right now. An overhaul of the auditorium, to kind of break down a little bit of what we just heard, increased seating capacity, updated LED lights that don't burn so hot in our concerts, updated sound reinforcement, including body mics for shows. Our students are working so hard, they deserve to be heard in the way that they're presenting their work. Audio and visual recording and live stream capabilities, a reconfiguration of the stage to better fit our needs, acoustic sound shells and cloud, as Bob mentioned previously, better handicap accessibility, and easy-to-use controls for meetings and presentations and outside groups so that the space becomes a little bit more accessible for the general high school population, and of course just improved acoustics. The third piece being an addition of a scene shop or theater storage at the high school. We think that this will be a great way to alleviate some of these space concerns that the auditorium currently faces so that there isn't such a logjam of getting into that room for events. And there isn't as many materials and set pieces and stuff lying on the stage. This is for the future recommendations in our elementary school: improve their performance spaces, enlarge their ensemble rehearsal spaces, and better access to technology and storage capacity. And at Farnsworth Middle School, enlarge our instrumental rehearsal classrooms, our lesson spaces, which right now are a bit small and don't have any windows, increase storage, and an overhaul of that performance space, that being the cafetorium. These last two slides reflect future recommendations that we wanted to just show everybody, but of course with the recommendations for May 2025 being with mostly with the high school. And at this point, did you want to talk about this here or?
So there's just a link there to a longer version of this presentation that has some more extensive data in terms of our survey findings and more information from the site visits that we did. So that is linked there as well. Questions?
So as we try to consider all these recommendations, can you just speak briefly about the student responses and also how the space inadequacy affects teaching and learning, because we need to link it back.
Yeah, I'll let you talk about
Yeah,
this.
sure. The student responses, we were really impressed by how many kids came out to participate in those surveys. And, you know, in this district, our students take tremendous pride in their ensembles and in their course offerings and what they're doing on stage and in their rehearsal spaces. But they're frustrated with some of the conditions that their learning is happening in. They don't have places to practice. And we have a lot of students that don't have as easy access to practice at home. They live in apartment buildings where practicing in the evening is tough to do when they get home from sports. And there isn't always a place that we can have them go because there's days where our spaces, every single space in the music department is being used. No technology that, you know, if I wanted to put up a list of our goals and objectives in a given lesson period, there's no place to do that. We have a lot of students who are involved in honor ensembles and festivals where they go and see neighboring school districts, and they come back to us and they're like, how come we don't have this? How come we don't have this? And it's hard to kind of, through their understanding, bring that to them, and they're using sometimes part of their instructional time just to set up the space, just moving chairs and stands around to be able to have rehearsal. As far as how it relates to instruction, Blanca, this obviously affects me personally. This is the building I teach in, and it's the classroom space that Greg and I that we don't have, and I would say it's difficult always to make the first thing we do each day involve the greatest possible instruction when you don't necessarily know what your classroom is going to look like any given day, and our kids are coming in ready to play because they've worked really hard the night before, and they're starting rehearsal by setting up their chairs and stands. And there's times where we have to graciously ask them during study halls to, hey, rehearsal for the next 2 weeks is going to be in the LGI. Can you help us set up for tomorrow morning's rehearsal? And it's taxing on them and on the process, but it's we found a way. But I hope that kind of speaks to the answer of your question there.
It does, thank you. I just felt like that was important, since one of the reasons we're here is because our students had come out originally, and our music parents as well, to share that with us. So I just wanted the public to hear that again.
I think that it really speaks to the perseverance of our music faculty here at the high school, because they are dealing with a lot, and it's physically taxing, but it's also mentally taxing as well. To have to move your classroom for several weeks at a time, several times throughout the school year. Having all of our instrument storage in one room creates a log jam in a hallway that's already pretty tight in that part of the building. And so it's a safety hazard, it's a hazard for instruments. So it's something that they're dealing with every day, and the success that our program has seen has come in spite of the limitations of our space. So they should be very much commended, both the students and the faculty.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, you've done so much with so little, and during the pandemic, we kept hearing, we're asking our teachers to do so much and to pivot like every 5 seconds. Our music department is doing that every day, and also theater.
Luckily, we already had the skills.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Kim?
Yeah, I just wanted to know, because you've talked about having like storage in different areas and things, how much instructional time right now is being lost just by the students who have to come in and move the chairs and get their instruments and move around things? And
I'll let John speak to this, but what I will say is that it kind of depends on the day, because sometimes they will arrive that morning and we won't know that an event has gone on the night before where things have been broken down, and all of a sudden they've got a lot of setup to do. So maybe you can speak a little bit more on the day-to-day.
Yeah, and at different times of the year are different. It's when we're in the heat of musical season, that's the big priority in that space, and we're just trying to fit around that. The last few years, we've had to come down here because our ensembles are too big to fit anywhere else in the music wing. About how much time on the daily? Well, during third block music study hall, we start study hall by clearing the stage, all 80 chairs and stands, so that the theater department can have access to a cleared stage for their practices and their classes. And that's how they end every GP rehearsal, is by setting up 80 chairs and stands and percussion equipment for the band that meets at 7:25 the next morning. That's every day. That's not with any specific events or concerts or anything like that going on. I think that hopefully speaks to answer your question.
yeah, no, it does. To be honest, personally, I always wondered, because when you go into like even where they practice for orchestra, it's so tight in there that even the idea of having to come in, grab your instrument, then go to a seat and get settled, it's
a lot.
It's a lot, yeah.
Even during the performances, I've honestly been afraid you were going to fall off. And as soon as
Me too.
you start dancing, and I'm like, oh my God.
It's tight up there, yeah.
Thank you so much.
I was wondering, maybe we could just ask, like, for example, when you're saying that a lot of the kids in apartment buildings don't have places to practice, can we reach out to the businesses and institutions, say, can you give us a spot, for our kids to say, say at the libraries, the small meeting rooms, say, hey, can we have kids practice there? Little things like that, just to kind of say, look, you don't have to practice, if there's space, it's there for you. If an ensemble wants to practice, I don't know, at Cross Gates or something, they're in a corner, not really bothering anybody. No one's really going to care. Just little things like that, so that they feel like they've got a chance, that they're not secluded to the high school. And my other question is, I'm assuming that when you guys want to expand all the rooms, you probably want to take away like where the garden area is and expand into that.
I mean, I don't think we've gotten into much specifics yet. I mean, that's where our spaces are right now, but we haven't sat down too deeply with the architect to look at that kind of stuff yet.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Pretty much just close the meeting, right? Just have to close the meeting.
Hi, everybody. So our subcommittee is Gathering Spaces, and we had a lot of good discussions, and I think to sum it up, we'll get to our recommendations, but I think a lot of what everybody has already said is the themes that are throughout. Flexibility, adaptability, ability to change things quickly, and to reconfigure as needed. We had a number of committee members: Grady Abbasi, Antonino Manzella, Dave Howell, Joan McGrath, Jessica Hennessy, Jesse Hanna, Assini Anaretti, Mike Laster, and Renee Heller. And we looked at a variety of different spaces and research from beyond education in general. We looked at colleges, we looked at some fire spaces. The idea being that gathering spaces are not unique to K-12 schools, so maybe getting some ideas from other places, even taking some of the power ideas from airports. They really go beyond, a K-12 classroom. So our guiding concepts, what is going to provide our spaces with the most flexibility and versatility going forward? And in particular, of those, what materials will help us keep a lasting impact for future generations? Usability, so that we're not replacing it, and durability. And what about sustainability? What about the environmental impact? There's a strong desire to find things that are sustainable going forward. In particular, what furniture is appropriate for those spaces? Every building has very unique gathering spaces, so looking at each individual space is going to be challenging, finding what's going to work. Colors and visual aesthetics were the next thing. There's a lot of desire for things to feel warm and inviting and not sterile, as one of the groups said, not feel like you're walking into, a space that's old and outdated. And then the other thing was, how can we be sure there's sufficient power? More and more of us are tethered to devices that they get old and the batteries don't work out so well, and whether that's Chromebooks or phones or multiple devices, especially for gathering spaces, what do students need and what do the community needs to make sure we can keep going with the work we're doing? Jesse Hanna, who's a middle school science teacher, said it best, and I think this really encapsulates the whole committee's, the whole Future Ready Task Force. All our recommendations, it's about consistency, simplicity, and clean. When we don't have consistency, it adds to the chaos of kids' lives. And I couldn't think of a better way to sum up the work that everybody's done other than that statement. That's really, when we look at it, what we want to see. So we broke our recommendations into two groups, short-term and long-term. Short-term, we want to see more integration of natural light, make sure we have flexible seating and space configuration, as everybody's talked about, easily accessible AV technology, and there are places where we'd like to increase signage, both digital signage and bulletin boards or displays with information, and more traditional signage where you can look down a hallway and see what teacher's classroom it is without having to walk down and see the door. Long term, we're looking at how can we incorporate AI for our public facilities so that things naturally adapt to the groups in them that need that. And we're aware that that's a long-term desire. Wireless charging, multiple charging stations, and in particular, what about the possible outdoor connections, particularly for lunch and meals? We know at the high school, students enjoy being able to eat outside in a courtyard where it's secure and kept off from the rest of the building. It's not open to the outside. You know, if there's any opportunity for outdoor connections, if the last couple years have taught us anything, it's the value of being outside and having access to that light. To do our research, we took the things from Thought Exchange, and in particular, we looked at the keywords, clean, updated, and welcoming. And what you can see is the things that we have here are really what everybody's talked about so far tonight. This is all hyperlinked, and this is available to anybody who wants to look at it, and you'll see ideas that we researched for cafeterias and kitchen facilities, lobbies, libraries and large group spaces, other common spaces, and some of our other ideas. The idea really here being we gave ideas of what we had and tried to boil our recommendations down into as simple as possible. We really want to make sure that the buildings maintain a cohesive look, and you'll see the different research that is through here that you can look at. But not every building has to look exactly like every other building. It was important that we want people to feel like the high school is different than the middle school, is different than each elementary school, and they're different from each other. But that we want that cohesive, so you're not walking in and seeing different chunks of dates, times, colors. Lobbies, we looked at large group spaces and we looked at the different things that people had done, and it really came down to flexible seating and flexible arrangement of furniture. Libraries and large group spaces, really it was a lot of that has already gone into it. Some of our libraries are up to date, and our librarians have done a fantastic job of adapting those spaces with furniture and lighting and rugs and things that make it feel homey. And then outdoor spaces. We looked at green and gardening spaces, in particular, what's the environmental impact on these, and you can see the things that we took our inspiration from. Some of the pictures for the outdoor spaces included growing plants and giving back to the community, which I know many of our schools do. Our digital signage, we took inspiration from a number of different places, and you can see around our buildings that we've already incorporated some. And finally, this was some of these signs that help you look down a hallway to see where you're going or who you're going to see, particularly with some different languages or some pictures to help out those who have, may benefit from those, whether you are proficient in reading or not yet. It's nice to be able to see where you're going. And then here's our research for artificial intelligence. So, at the risk of keeping it short, what questions can I answer? Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any questions in the crowd or any comments? Anything? Yeah, hi Nathan.
Do I have to go up?
No, you can yell from your seat.
We can't hear.
Oh, sorry.
The community won't be able to hear.
My bad, sorry, Nathan.
I just have a basic question. With the exception of the performing arts section, it seemed like everything was reconfiguring or versatile, Was that a conscious effort to kind of avoid expanding footprint of the buildings we have now, using what we have and not so much going out? It seemed like we're trying to figure out ways to use what we have, not necessarily figuring out what we need that we might not have in terms of space.
So we're mindful of the aidability of the work. And so expanding beyond our current footprint will have a big implication on that. So I think the answer is yes. I don't know if, Mike, you want to weigh in because you would know more about what we could actually do given our footprint and such.
So in the meetings that I attended with the group, we didn't specifically talk or steer anyone away from saying every building needs additions. But what was nice about the conversations, there weren't any that I attended that said every classroom needs to be 300 square feet bigger. It was about how can we take the space we have, better configure it with flexible furniture options and storage that might be movable or on casters so that we can better utilize it. But I didn't attend any meetings where, whether it was parents or student groups or faculty or staff, said our rooms are inadequately undersized, with the exception of music. There are some spaces with performance that you clearly can't have 100 students in. So it's more the performing arts that we heard that more often. And I don't think it was ever stated as an objection or as an objective to not put additions on all the buildings. But it didn't come up organically in those conversations.
And I don't think anyone said you can't do that.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, no one ever said that.
Okay, if there's no more comments or questions, can we get a motion to adjourn into executive session? Okay, Meredith, second Kelly. All those in favor? Okay, thank you, everyone.
Thank you for sharing your computer with me.